Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vishal from Reconnect Energy. Let me add few more lines to what Narsi said. Our work revolves around everything that happens around the clean energy ecosystem. So the moment you put interesting set of assets to the grid, be it large-scale renewables or distributed RE, which is another growing part, and followed by EVs and then smart meter-enabled consumers, there is a lot that happens at a grid scale. And the variable energy, what we call it, it requires some degree of visibility, understanding, and planning aspects where you need a lot of predictive analytics and automation to kick in to have the resiliency and reliability of the grid attached to it. And that's where we come in. We build software products. Our tech platform is called GridConnect, and the core purpose of GridConnect is enable more RE into the grid. And we have two set of clients, if you put a broad bucket of things there. One is the renewable set of asset owners who are putting grid scale renewable assets into the grid. There we have close to 3,500 clients across India. We build AI and grid automation stack for them. We work with the renewable asset owner, help them do an efficient dispatch of their electricity to the grid. And what it means by dispatch is every asset which gets connected to the grid, they need to tell grid well in advance how much energy you are going to put in. And if you go wrong there are financial penalties. And that's one reason why renewable asset owners would want to deploy some sort of predictive analytics into their day-to-day operations. So there is one bucket of things. And the second set of clients that we work with is basically the energy utilities. Starting with grid operations, because now you have more RE coming to the grid, you need faster energy market. And for that, what you also need is whole digital ecosystem which can enable you to not only interact with the energy market and energy grids, but also settle your transactions financially. And that's where we build extension of the software products, package it, supply it to the energy utilities. And currently, we have around 15 utilities client in India. We got our first international success a few months ago. And now we are looking to expand internationally. Yeah. So that's a brief background. I'll leave it to Professor Satya to explain more about his work.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. Right. First of all, I want to point out that we are about running 1 hour late. So maybe we'll try to keep this session a bit shorter. In the interest of everybody's time. Second, I think although Narsi was saying 9 startups all the time, it's practically inappropriate to actually be running 9 startups. So I don't really run 9 startups at all. I'm actually an advisor to 8 of them. I run only 1 of them. So the startup that I actually am working full-time at is ePlane. Everything else is done by other founders, co-founders. Of course, depending upon which startup succeeds, at what milestone that becomes very popular, then I turn out to be like a co-founder of that particular startup as a flavor of the season. But right, so we might as well bask in that glory, reflected glory, so to speak. But here I'm mainly going to be talking about my experience with building ePlane. ePlane is essentially, of course, a startup that is aiming to make air taxis affordable in city skies. But that's, let's say, the end state game, at least as of now. In my view, in my passion, my ultimate goal is to actually sort of electrify aviation completely as ePlane, which means that all planes that we fly should actually become electric planes at some point of time, but may not happen in my lifetime, but right, but the journey goes on, and we will make a start. The way we actually make a start is to focus on what's called the electric VTOLs, vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that could, in the interim, become like air taxis. We feel that we could actually start off and go to market with things like air ambulances that would actually have a better societal acceptance, as well as fewer rides that you might see in the skies in the next couple of years. That's a kind of time frame that we think it'll take for us to actually certify the plane that we would make few prototypes off through 2025, and then get the certification through 2026. The decks are actually getting clear with the regulators for both certifying the planes as well as the vertiports where you would land. I think just this last week, the aircraft certification standards were released for India, and I think the week before last, the vertiport standards for India were released. These are good signs for us to be able to focus on how to build a certifiable aircraft. Of course, needless to say, we have been working with the regulatory agencies in shaping up the policies, and we have also been clued into what's the international standards that are also evolving around here, so that we can be internationally compliant. So that said, I think a few points that I would like to probably make in building the startup and the journey that we have gone through is we also actually make quite a few drones, starting with like agricultural drones and going to long distance cargo drones and drones with camera payloads for multiple different applications and so on. Of course, those are something that we started out with as subscale prototypes to actually build and check how our entire product development process, starting with even CFD or FEA as an analysis or simulations, all of those things to be validated, all the way up to flight tests and so on. So it was sort of like a frugal way of developing the entire product, sort of like a de-risking product development. But on the way, we also actually have this opportunity to be able to go to market with those and clock some revenues. That's something that we have also been doing. So every deep tech startup, I think, has this burden on how quickly you can go to market while you're still building your larger product. And that's the kind of balancing that we end up doing. I think Vishal as well actually has done that kind of pivoting in his life, I think, in his career. So these are interesting thoughts that we could probably share with the audience while we discuss. But the other similarity that I can also see with what Vishal does is ultimately most of these products, whether it is the ePlane or the drone or even Agnikul for that matter. Agnikul is actually a very good example of product as a service. Nobody really questions a rocket company when they actually go out and launch the rocket. Whereas they've asked me this question, do you want to be a plane maker or do you want to actually be a plane operator? How can you be both? And I've never understood this. A rocket guy, it's okay for a rocket guy to actually go launch, right? Why is it not okay for a drone guy to actually go fly, right? So there are lots of these kinds of questions that keep coming up with people. I think the world is going around in the direction where product as a service will actually become a very important paradigm, where you make a very niche product with which you have a undue advantage in the market, where you can get past all competitors. You have to leverage that the undue advantage by going out and offering that product for a service in the market. And that's what I think Vishal is also doing, pretty much, right? So that's where I would probably stop my intro, and then we can get into a conversation.
Yeah, so very interesting point in terms of how do you identify customers and what you do to kind of scale from A to B. And that's where we also had our fair share of challenges. So when we were doing pure play, RE-centric, software-led services, we realized that, of course, with few thousand customers, market is going to get saturated. So you have to have kind of product built in which can further extend your journey towards the utility side, because it's a two sides of coin, right? Somebody generating, putting energy to the grid, and then on the other side, there are different entities who are tasked to manage the grid and also find some financial value for them. So in terms of the evolution of our own thought process, few realizations that happened were one around what's the customer scale and size you can look at, and are you really catering to a really sizable chunk of market? Now, when you are focused on only at a grid scale operations, there are a handful of entities you can work. And the realization for us was, okay, you have few thousand customers who are going to generate X amount of revenue over certain period of time, but it's a growing pot. And then the need to manage grid more and more efficiently, it's kind of given, right? Without any policy intervention also, it's a fundamental layer that at a country level you need to have, where you start understanding what kind of energy you are going to deal with. However, on the distribution side and transmission side, when it comes to the conventional energy utilities, pretty much public-owned entities, they don't move until they see a sizable kind of, a catastrophe or intervention which will call for certain modification in their approach. So for example, in 2012, there was a blackout in India, and it was like an international shame, right? You could not manage your grid, and there was a cascade tripping. The reason for the blackout was there were few utilities who were overdrawing electricity from the grid, not worried about financial consequences, and that's where the grid tightening started happening at a very rapid pace. And that led to multiple intervention. A lot of them could be provided by software layers like we provide and bunch of other companies provide. But the whole foundation of smart grid, if I were to look at as a power system engineer, evolved around that event. Like in 2008, financial crisis hit. Lot many other interventions at a policy level and technology level evolved globally. In India, from the grid operations point of view, that one event triggered so many multiple policy developments around how do you handle grid, if you have more RE-rich grids, what more you can do, how do we shape energy markets, and who all are going to be the key player in the ecosystem. And then that's where we started kind of stitching together software products which can solve one problem after other. And one more important realization was that unless there is real financial value, be it a government utility or a private player, nobody is going to buy your software product, no matter how good or appealing it is, because there has to be a financial angle to it. And unless you solve that, your go-to-market strategy or your marketing strategy, all of that will fail unless you solve, this couple of questions. And today now, where we are at about 3,500 clients, the next question is how do we jump to maybe say a few tens of thousand clients and maybe few 100,000 clients in India and globally. And again, will the same product work? The answer is no. What do we need more to happen? Some of them are policy level changes, which may happen in next couple of years. Broadly, we categorize our technology offering as a grid tech platform. And there we see that for us to scale, it's also important to not only stick to what you have built, further keep enhancing it, keep finding more and more set of customers, willing customers, where you end up providing some financial or operational value, and keep doing it repeatedly without fail, and then you look at global scale. So that's the broad story that we have.
So I have a question. I've always been curious about this. So what do you think we need to actually do in order to have a better uptake of, let's say, smart microgrids, right? So if you do that, then you let communities develop their own grids and make their own power distributed locally, and then so on, and maybe cut down transmission losses and all of that. But you also still have to actually have that integrated with the national grid and so on. So how do you think that that's going to work out?
Yes. So when you look at microgrids, so there are two tracks in which the grid is expanding. One way, we are enhancing the network, where the objective for government and at a policy level is you want electricity to be reached every corner of the country. Availability. What is changing now is that the rise of distributed solar energy, and about 6 months ago, Honorable Prime Minister also made a very broad scale scheme around rooftop solar. So even if we take policy status quo as is, what's going to change in next 3-4 years is 1 crore rooftop solar, 10 million rooftop solar plants, residential rooftop we are planning, and roughly around 35,000 megawatt is what we are estimating that capacity to be. If majority of the consumers are actively becoming a prosumer, you will definitely have a need for more and more microgrid enabled frameworks. And along with that, what is also happening in terms of energy transition, the commercial and industrial customers who are deserting their utilities in leaps and bounds because the tariffs are very high, the renewable suppliers are offering much cheaper electricity. Now, if you look at distribution company today, their greatest earning pot is from the residential users, which is the second category, and the largest category, commercial and industrial customer. Both of them are going away. And the agri is where you have heavily subsidized electricity going in. So 5 years, 7 years down the line, we are looking at scenario where whether the distribution companies like it or not, they will be left with a business which is pretty much nothing but owning a network business. And that is where we see that even if there is no political will, they will be compelled to move towards more democratized way of having electricity markets function. The UPI moment for electricity will trigger not now, but with many those small milestones like P2P trading, Karnataka has enabled, UP has enabled. It'll come at scale when, say, every residential household has their own rooftop. Even today, they are bringing in Discom as an intermediary. Eventually, it will go. So the microgrids or other network of grid-connected nodes coming together and forming a resilient grid, we are not far away, but a lot of technological layers have to kind of kick in, certain policy layers, and of course, the financial pressure will take you there.
So a couple of points there is about grid-level storage, right? So, and storage could actually be a problem that can be mitigated again if you actually have the grid to be a smaller one, and which is a microgrid, but eventually connected to the national grid itself. So what's the outlook on storage becoming a significant problem solved in the next 5 to 7 years that you're optimistic about? And similarly, the advent of electric vehicles, including the air taxis that we will want to also tax the grid on, right? So what is the challenge with those that would come? And it could also be an opportunity where you're looking at like a vehicle to grid, where the energy stored in the vehicle when it's not operating could actually go back to the grid and so on, right? So those opportunities exist as well. Right. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, so fantastic question. Storage goes hand in hand with renewables, and it's pretty much relatable, right? You have variability around what point in time in a day you get your electricity, and if large chunk comes from renewable, you also need a mimicking infrastructure which can help you ride through those peaks and valleys. In terms of value prop, if you're a distribution company, you may use storage to eliminate certain choke point where there is a peak loading requirement. You don't have to expand your distribution network. You simply go for putting a small storage device. While it is expensive today, it still makes a sense. At a grid scale, from the resilience point of view, at a grid operator's point of view, when you look at, you also need very fast response storage technologies which can help you either charge very fast or respond very fast, much like a very large hydropower plant. And again, the magnitude is what matters there. So that's another layer of technology. There is also long duration storage where the pace of charge and discharge may not be quite high, but also the ability to store that energy for a very long duration is another valuable use case, because while you take wind and solar for granted, year on year their behavior changes in terms of what's the absolute amount of energy you can extract year on year, and the seasonal variations or other annual variations you can look at could vary anywhere from plus minus 10% to sometimes 25%. And in those scenarios, if you are heavily reliant on clean energy ecosystem only, you still need to address those issues. Coming to V2G space, vehicle to grid, with more and more EVs coming in, what is changing from the energy ecosystem point of view is, a few decades down the line scenario, if you plot, we are looking at all forms of energy getting converted into electricity first. And hence the energy markets, electricity markets, both are going to kind of pretty much merge into single market. And there, the interconnected network points, be it a household user connected with rooftop system, having smart meter, start doing P2P trading, or a fleet owners operating EV fleets at scale, could also start putting few gigawatt scale response to the grid. And the orchestration at that level, you also need lot more mature energy market, much faster and connected digital ecosystem. Another, same parallel I'll draw again with the banking. Pre-UPI, you could not do a banking transaction without involving a bank. Today with UPI, bank acts as a hidden layer, right? You still need to have a bank, but you can have any app, and we can enable it can enable you to transact between two parties seamlessly, instantly. Electricity is where we are going to see that moment happening. And the same architect, Mr. Nilekani, is working on backend protocol. There you will see that once that digital layer emerges, all these barriers to entry around smart grids or microgrids or even vehicle to grid kind of infrastructure and the energy exchange will take place.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, I'm able to see a lot of parallels with what we do, and fundamentally, I believe that there is going to be a convergence of energy and transportation in the future. I think both of them are going to be fairly synchronous with each other. So we do have to worry about storage on board. First of all, we actually use stored energy on board when we are doing an electric plane, and if you have to go a little longer distance, we probably have to have an onboard electricity generator. Because we still have to have VTOLs. We want to get away from runways, and these VTOLs require distributed electric propulsion, and we can't have mechanical transmission or local engines for each of those. That makes it too heavy. So it's much easier to actually connect wires from a centralized energy source, which could be a stored energy or could be generated right there. And all of these could also actually be solutions for the terrestrial or let's say land-based energy requirements otherwise, instead of using in transportation. So I feel that doing electric planes in some sense actually pushes the envelope on these technologies that could have other spin-offs for regular use. And I share your optimism that in the 5 to 7 years, I think we may be able to crack both these problems together.
Very true. I have one counter question for you. So while we talk about electric planes, the way energy ecosystem is evolving, you have a lot more clean energy based ecosystem, a lot of developments around PV as a tech, hydrogen as a tech, which is kind of intergalactic fuel. And now we are also talking about the SMRs, right, small modular reactors, which can operate at a base scale. You can pretty much have a 30 megawatt SMR, which can power your maybe large mall or a large commercial building pretty much forever with very little residue coming. How do you see the confluence of this ecosystem enabling us getting closer to a spacefaring species, right? Because solar alone can't get you there, the storage alone can't get you there. The shared optimism you talked about, what are your views?
No, I think there is kind of like some sort of an economic equilibrium about all these things. So I personally feel that India actually has a much smarter approach to tackling the climate problem when compared to, let's say, Europe is actually the best example I can think of. I mean, just as two paradigms of thought, not that Europe is not doing what we're doing and vice versa. The European thought process, when actually they started becoming aware of the climate action that's required, I think America still continues to debate whether climate is a problem or not. That's a different thing altogether, but we don't want to get into that. But the general thought was that we have to pay more for reducing carbon emissions, right? So, and there should be carbon tax or any of those kinds of things. I think the Indian view is, is it possible for me to actually get cheaper technologies that can be sustainable, right? So the accent here is actually on cost consciousness rather than trying to tackle the climate problem. I mean, it's not to say that we don't bother about the climate, but I think we bother more about the pocket than the planet, unfortunately, in this part of the world, right? And I think that's not a bad thing at all, because that's what actually pushes us to get smarter and smarter with any new things. So I feel we have actually done quite a bit on PVs and, let's say, batteries at the moment. I think batteries are going to get better with better chemistries, which are more sustainable and so on in the future. That's the direction in which I see things getting disrupted in terms of cost. In fact, I look forward to a time where electricity will actually become almost free. right? Like, I mean, today we actually take Wi-Fi for granted, internet for granted, and all that stuff. I don't even know who pays for it. I don't know. I'm not paying for WhatsApp, for example, right? So, right. So all these business models is something that I don't even understand. But we will probably get to that point with power, and that's actually my dream, right? I would really want to be there. But that said, I think going towards hydrogen just for the sake of actually saying that no carbon emissions or nuclear and so on, I'm still doubtful about the cost part of it. And therefore, it's important that we need to have like a few people actually continue to work on it so that they can afford to work on it in the first place and bring down the cost over time. But it's going to take a little longer. I think maybe, I mean, particularly from an aviation point of view, we're looking at hydrogen coming in only by later part of this decade or sometime next decade, not happening anytime sooner. Yeah.
Thank you. I think Narsi is here.
Get the audience to ask you some questions.
Yes.
Sure, we'll love to do that.
Okay. Any questions, guys, from the audience? Yeah, Mike, please. Somebody.
I'm Pramod, co-founder of Sirinor, and I'm chief engineer. So we are working on electric jet engines ranging from 1 kilonewton to all the way up to 50 kilonewtons. So my question to Professor Satya is like, what do you think about India not having its own aircraft or aero engine technology? Like, is it a funding gap or talent gap, or it's a policies?
I think largely it's been policies in the past. I have unfortunately been a bit too old to understand that a little bit. Right, so I've talked to people like Professor Odam Narasimha, the late Professor Narasimha, about it. In fact, he being as old as he was when he passed away, he used to say that they used to actually talk to Prime Minister Indira Gandhi about this. And back then, she used to say that, you know, if you guys can actually agree upon doing one thing, then I'll be able to fund it. And then they never really agreed upon any one thing to do, and so on. So civilian aeronautics actually has been a problem in India. And that's been largely because, see, I feel that the 20th century actually has been a huge distortion, particularly in things like aviation, rockets, and all that stuff. They were always thinking about like very large rockets, very large planes, and very large airports, and all of that stuff. And that is still how the West is thinking about it. And what we are doing is to actually disrupt that. And then we say that it's possible to actually make smaller rockets, smaller planes, and still have markets for those. And smaller satellites. Satellites are actually definitely becoming smaller, so there is a market for smaller rockets. And similarly, if you're actually having to go electric, which makes planes much simpler, you need to actually make smaller planes so that we can fly within the city, and so on. So these markets are actually driving these kinds of innovations, which are now possible with you know, private play. But otherwise, it used to be always thought of as a government thing. And while the government would actually want to put money in strategic sectors like space and defense, they never really thought that they need to do so for civil aviation, actually. And that's the reason why we were that way. But otherwise, I think there was absolutely nothing that's stopping us.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Firoz. I am doing a research in IIT Energy Consortium. My question is to Vishal. The delta between the electricity price during peak and midday seems to be increasing over time as more solar are adding.
Yes.
And how long it take to implement dynamic pricing and all. I talked to someone who working on this, and he said that the utility companies and distributors are very hesitant to move fast, or they are not implementing dynamic pricing. Or he doesn't seem it going to happen any sooner. And the landing pricing in the power exchange and all make arbitrage and vehicle to grid not that economic viable, right?
True.
And when did you expect the UPI moment of electrical grid going to happen?
Yes, so excellent set of questions. Starting with the first question on price, what has happened over the last 3 years is that there is a rapid rise of solar. And 3-4 years ago, if you see when would India consume its peak electricity, that would be between 6 to 8 p.m. And we used to call it peak hours, right? Even today at IEX, if you go, their peak hours will be evening hours, right? Not the daytime. With the rise of solar, what has started happening is the prices has started reflecting the solar production curve in an invert proportion. So your daytime, your peak demand in India today has shifted to afternoon hours, not because the actual demand exists at peak, but demand for us is what supply you have and what point in time you deliver. Rest all is latent demand, which you don't deliver, right? So the true peak, we don't know. But what has happened is the peak consumption has shifted. If you look at the northern grid or western grid or southern grid, northern grid even more because it's full of concentrated solar. In Rajasthan and UP and Punjab and Haryana, there is very little wind. And the exchange prices have mimicked that phenomena, primarily driven by what point in time the utilities supply their electricity. And night hours, when electricity used to get sold under 1 rupee for a very, very long time, there you see a rates hitting the peak price, which is 10 rupee. 2 years ago, the peak price was 20 rupee. Had the 10 rupee cap not been there, the prices at night 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock would have been almost about 20 bucks or so, right? So the shift has come because of how the new energy ecosystem is evolving. The second question that you asked about the V2G space, even with all the interventions, the green energy open access where there are a lot of incentives, the way the transactions are taken place even today, it's more of a different network layers are there between the consumption and supply, and each network layer wants its own fair share of revenue, right? The moment you start utilizing the network layer to fulfill your private transaction, distribution companies are still not open to enable many more private transactions. India categorically is a wholesale energy market. So retailers like you and me, where you have your own house, you can't go to market and say, I want a different supplier and not this distribution company. Since 2014, the government is trying hard to enact laws. Just a technical bit around it, electricity is comes as a concurrent subject, which means that the state has its own rights to decide what you do with the electricity as a distribution and consumption, and center can only move up to a bit. And that is the fundamental issue where reforms don't come in so fast in this sector. And distribution companies are dead against enabling many consumers go out and explore alternate supplier. The supplier could be green, the supplier could be cheaper, and the viability gets killed because all the layers which starts acting against those private transactions. And there only a political will can potentially, take you far. The last question, when is the UPI moment of energy is going to kick in? We are not far away, right? Putting down exact timeline will be very difficult. However, what is changing as an infra layer, we are putting almost 250 million smart meters. 130 million are already auctioned and awarded. Another 120 million are underway. So another 4-5 years down the line, we will look at scenario, every household will have a smart meter. The primary purpose for smart meter today is enable timely billing and reduce AT&C losses. The next larger purpose will evolve around what do you do with the data, right? How do you mine and understand your customer? This is the utilities viewpoint. The consumer's viewpoint would be, you have a smart meter, you are also going to have rooftop solar. If you have certain surplus energy, are the policymakers allowing you to transact? And when those layers kind of stitch in, we are very soon going to have a larger and larger democratic demand coming in for enabling UPI equivalent mode where you have some surplus energy, you want to give it to your friend, your neighbor for free, or at a cost, you want that right. We are not far away. I can't put down the exact timeline, but we are inching closer every day.
Thank you, thank you.
Hi.
Please give mic to Narsi. Narsi has question.
Hi. This is Dheeraj. I run a small solar company here in Tamil Nadu. I like the way the candid conversation you guys had. So my question is, I'm making an interface where I'm connecting my solar, my BESS, and probably hydrogen is coming up. I don't know how soon or how later. And then could be more of new other technologies that could be coming up for smaller timelines. Like for example, I believe solar could be here for next 3 years or 5 years maximum. or maybe more. So I wanted to understand, so if I'm going to make this interface, I'm probably building an interface here. And if I'm making an interface, I wanted to understand how sooner or later hydrogen could be coming in a very decentralized way, like how now solar is happening and then BESS or the energy storage systems are coming. Do you think there is viability? Because there are a lot of questions on its transportation and storage. So I would like if you can answer a bit.
Would you like to answer on hydrogen bit?
The hydrogen part, I mean, I've been following primarily from a transportation point of view, and I think there are a couple of options there which are either based on hydrogen ice or hydrogen fuel cells. My view is that hydrogen fuel cells are still a little farther out, simply because although there are lots of indications that it actually would be more favored, simply because the efficiencies are higher. But you need to have a higher purity level of hydrogen, and hydrogen itself is more expensive as of today. And it's going, I think the decline in the price is not, I mean, I'm not seeing that happening very steeply in the next few years. Could actually happen over a 10-year period or so. And then fuel cells are also expensive. So hydrogen ice actually seems to be a better proposition. And even if you're thinking about it from a power generation point of view, hydrogen ice is actually a better bet when compared to fuel cells in the near term, is my take. For transportation, there is also an added layer of hydrogen being extremely bulky. So transportation is a pain. You need to actually pressurize it to about something like 600 bar. And hydrogen tanks will have to be safer, and so on. So it's extremely cumbersome to think about it from a transportation point of view, but I think terrestrials to this thing, what do you call, utilization, it's a bit better, particularly if you're using it with the hydrogen ice. The purity levels may not be so high, and therefore it may be a bit cheaper there. Yeah.
It cannot be liquefied, right? So it's either hydrogen ice or your gas.
Sorry, can you speak closer to the mic?
Yeah, so I was asking if it cannot be liquefied, right?
It can be. I didn't want to stretch the point a bit more, right? But it is possible to actually get down to 20 Kelvin and do this. There are a couple of companies, startups that actually came up to me discussing designs of cryogenic liquid hydrogen storage. So I encouraged them to first of all crack the cryogenic liquid oxygen storage and liquid CNG, LNG. Storage and all of that stuff. Those things are actually getting a lot more commoditized now, and subsequently we can actually attack the liquid hydrogen problem. So the question basically is how are you going to store liquid hydrogen is a bigger question when compared to making liquid hydrogen in the first place. Making liquid hydrogen, storing liquid hydrogen.
It's a process. Yeah. One last question. So now in Tamil Nadu we have
Can we have it from somebody else, please? I think we are just. I think we should be a bit more democratic. Yeah, maybe this chap, the young chap, you can meet them. I mean, I'll make sure I tie them up somewhere outside. You can meet them and ask the question. Yeah.
It's a democratic world. We can connect on LinkedIn.
Let the question be short, guys. You see, these are deep tech can also be complex tech. It can take 1 hour to get a good answer. Make it short, my friend. Yeah, make it very short.
Hi, this is Ganesh. My question is on the challenges that we have in terms of grid integration and grid stability. So what are the challenges that we have, and what kind of opportunities are available for startups in that space?
So the grid integration is a very, very broad-based area, right? And it's relevant for renewables, distributed RE, EVs, smart consumers, and broadly at a utility level also. There is a whole ecosystem which is evolving. So step by step, if you just connect, you will find a lot of opportunities to work in that particular space. More RE, variability management, enable storage. More RE coming to grid, you also want faster energy market. So whole lot of automation, UPI equivalent interventions we need there. The third layer where if you have even more RE, you want flexibility for the consumers. And that's a very big pot, right, in terms of the overall market and the complexity around it. And you need a whole new layer of technology to address that. Why you need that? Because storage can only get used, certain extent. you want customer to or consumer to respond to the new reality of energy grids, which is going to be driven by RE. Tomorrow, if you have a very high wind season, in Europe, we have seen rates going negative. Negative means you consume, you get paid. In India, we don't have it. Now the policymakers have started discussing how do we get into that mode, right, where the rates can go negative. We have close to zero rates being discovered, right, during solar peak hours. So when you look at the long-drawn transition, the more and more new energy that kind of gets connected to grid, multiple layers kind of kick in. And you have plethora of opportunity to work in all these layers, be it production of RE or management of RE at grid level, or storage of energy, which can work both ways. And storage is a big bucket, right? So many layers of technologies you can add and multiple use cases. And the last mile is what do you do with the end consumer, right? Taking consumer to cleaner energy is again a big kind of opportunity. Making consumer flexible to the new energy requirement, it's another kind of large opportunity. So it's a whole spectrum you can kind of think of as an idea or a business value.
Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you very much. I need to just come in to make sure that even though it's an exciting session, I think both these guys will be in great demand, I'm sure. If I was sitting in the audience, I would really want to catch them and ask a lot of questions. I request you guys to be here for lunch. I don't know your schedules. I have been waiting for a long time to make sure that things go on time as well. Okay, finish it fast.
So good morning, sirs. I'm Rodik. We run a startup called CLIMAFIX Labs. We were India's first algal air purifier. And just to both of you, what are some key challenges that you see in climate startups in India specifically? And what are something they can overcome these obstacles to achieve very sustainable growth? And this one, second one specifically to you, sir. You said you had a bootstrap climate startup, and it could have been very challenging in the early days. How did you manage your operations and without much of external investment? And let's say we are a bootstrap climate startup as well. What advice would you give to me?
So I'll give a quick response to that. You talked about sustainable and growth. Have a focus on growth. Being sustainable is the most challenging part in this area, even more so if you're bootstrapped. And the only way you can be sustainable is have a clear eye on your revenue, know your customer, not the way banks do your KYC. When I say know them by their size, their spending power, their ability to make decisions for you or against you, and the entire value chain around those decisions which can bring you contract. And then ensure that you deliver. Because in a climate space, you have to play a long-drawn game, right? It's not a short cycle game where you build something, in 5th year you want to exit. It doesn't happen in most of the cases, right? Either you scale or you die. So plan that entire value. Operations are critical. Whatever you are delivering as a product, as a service, never disappoint your client, because most of these clients are going to be asset-heavy clients. They're going to be there for pretty much 20-25 years. Take care of them, they'll take care of you when they grow.
Yeah, I think my quick answer is, you can call whatever startup you want to do, whether it's a deep tech startup, climate tech, or food tech, or ed tech, or anything that you want to call. It's all about actually getting revenues ASAP, right? That's what people like about it, and that's actually a sad truth about India, right? So, but it's actually a good truth. When it's kind of like a bitter pill, I would say, that you have to swallow. So it's all about how quickly are you able to actually get to revenues within a reasonable time, right? That's what it's all about. As far as bootstrapping is concerned, of course, people like me, there's no way we can actually bootstrap. But I think the mantra here is that don't take money if you can avoid it, right? But then the flip side is that most bootstrapped startups actually get to see the light of day in terms of becoming very famous and so on. Like, let's say, becoming unicorns over about a 13-year horizon or any of those kinds of things. If you're okay with that, that's great, right? So you don't need to actually necessarily hurtle towards glory. On the other hand, let's say, if you actually take VC money where you probably needn't have taken, you might actually go through a lot of faster growth, and that also means that you may accumulate a lot of flab with like too many employees or doing lots of different things just because you have got money and so on, and you may get distracted, right? So you got to be extremely careful about taking money from people, I would think. Yeah.
Thank you, folks. Really interesting. Thank you, Vishal, Satya. Request two guys to come and give mementos. You may wonder, what is this two guys business? Well, originally it was supposed to be a civilized one guy. I was inviting Arun to come down. Arun, come down. Then my partner said, I have to shake hands with Satya and take a photograph with him. Will you allow me? I said, okay, both of you guys come up. The rules are there to make the life more enriching. So Mano, my partner, of course. Arun, a very brief introduction about him. I'm glad he could come both days. We started our, I think both of us started at the same time. I did a .com startup. Oh, that was many years back. He started at the same time, but he has stuck on. He runs venture intelligence, which is probably the I don't think he has much competition in what he does. He does a lot of intelligence for the venture capital community across all industries, of course, even though climate is becoming more and more important for him. So if there are VCs who want to say hi to him, not right away, we are having another session, so Arun, don't leave the place. Huh? I don't want those guys to come after you and have the guys gone. Talk to him. I think I'm very impressed. One guy who was stuck to what he really wanted to do. And I believe he does a whole lot of intelligence analysis for the VC community. That's Arun Natarajan for you. And then my partner. So my pleasure to have you guys give the mementos. So Mano, you made sure you gave it to Satya, yeah? He said, I'll give it to Satya because I want to take a photograph with him. Okay. So Satya, I told you were famous, man. You didn't agree. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We start.